Good morning, everyone. We are happy to have you all here, and I'm sure these guys need no introduction, but we've got Mayor Bob Burns and City Administrator Sharon Hansen here today, and they are going to give us a kind of an update on what's going on in the city and maybe some of the goals of the city in the next coming year, and then leave some time for questions at the end here. So I'll let them go ahead and get started. Welcome. Do you want to hold that or up here?
Well, let's, as we start, do we need the microphone? Or if I talk like this, are we okay? Or okay, if anyone has any trouble hearing, we will use the microphone.
Why don't you use it? I think back here kind of gets hard.
Okay, then we'll use it. Okay.
Better.
Okay, good. First off, again, my name's Bob Burns, Mayor. This is Sharon Hansen. Sharon, you've been City Administrator for
5 years.
5 years. So she has a ways to go. I've been mayor now for 31 years. So it's a pleasure to be here and talk. So we'll go through a number of things, and a number of these things we've also talked about at the State of the City address. We'll maybe go into a little more detail here, but I think the important thing for this morning is that we'd like this to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to raise up questions or clarifications, or stop us if we're going too fast, because this really is, we get as much out of this as perhaps you do, because it's really good for us to hear from you and your perspective. So once again, thank you for inviting us. Sharon, anything you want to add to that? So we have a handout, and that is some of the topics that we're going to talk about. One of the things that is not on that handout, that towards the end we will talk about, is because everybody is, concerned about the weather and what's going to happen when all the snow melts, and what's the prospect for flooding and that type of thing. So we will talk about that also towards the end. So I'll start, and let me start with just talking a little bit about our city council. So we've had a change, as you know, on our city council. So our city council, if I go from left to right, your left, to the right, so Jim Lazinski and Craig Schaefer, they both represent the same ward. Then C. Moaleski is, I'm not sure, do we have a pointer on this?
Yes.
Is it in the middle? Oh, here it is. Okay. This is C. Moaleski. She and Dr. Steve Meister represent Ward 2. C was newly elected. She is a very interesting person. She is was born in a refugee camp in Laos. She and her family live in Marshall. She also is, at her occupation, she's in charge of the Adult Basic Education Program in Marshall. Very talented person. And then John Alcorn was elected this last election. He and Amanda Schroeder represent the same ward. Amanda was elected in a special session, replacing Councilmember Don Edblum, who passed away last February. So including Amanda, Amanda and John and C, we have 3 new council members. So very good council. So I think we all feel good about that. So we kind of talk about, the top 10 issues, and these are the top 10 kind of in our mind. You may have other things that are top of your mind, and that's fine. We can talk about all those things. But the first thing I'll talk about is the sales tax extension. I know that there's been articles in the paper about our attempt to extend the local option sales tax. And of course, the purpose of the local option sales tax is for regional projects. So about 12 years ago, the city did go to the voters, ask for a local option sales tax, which is a half-cent sales tax. And that was used to construct and pay for the Merit Center as well as the Red Baron Arena. So we're nearing the time that sales tax collection period, we're a few years out, but we're nearing the time when the collection period will be over. So that was originally authorized for 15 years. So the process to extend the sales tax really goes to a vote of the public. But the first step in that process is that the legislature has to give us permission to go to a vote. So that's where we're at right now, is that we're working with the legislature that there would be a bill that would be included in the tax bill that would give us the authority to go to the voters to ask, can we extend the sales tax? We had the same request last year. And last year, the legislature went through the House Tax Committee, the Senate Tax Committee, ended up in the conference report, which was then rolled up into the big tax bill. And we all know last year, the legislature adjourned without passing a tax bill. So even though it was all set up last year to happen, it didn't happen because there wasn't a tax bill. So we're hopeful that this year that this will be included in the tax bill. And then the goal is that there would be a vote of the public, because this really should be a local decision. There would be a vote this November 2023, on whether or not the public wants us to extend the sales tax. And of course, it would be a referendum vote, and the question would be, should the sales tax be extended? And the purpose for the extension would be to pay for the new aquatic center. So our current aquatic center is in need of replacement. It was originally constructed in 1937. It has a number of deficiencies just because of age. We lose about 12,000 gallons of water each day during the summer, not because there's a crack or a hole, but because the concrete envelope is just so porous that it just seeps out of there. And that's not only water that we lose, but it's also water that has been heated, it's been treated with chemicals, so it's expensive to operate. In addition to that, many of you, are familiar with our pool. Your kids, your grandkids, or perhaps you have been at the pool. You know that it doesn't meet any ADA disabilities requirements. The bathhouse offers no privacy whatsoever, and the roof leaks, and the mechanical system, the plumbing and the pumps are basically all shot. So everything is in need of replacement. We had an engineering study a few years ago that we asked the engineers, do a thorough evaluation. Can this be salvaged? Can it be repaired? And they said, you're better off starting over so that is the intent. Now, the other intent is, again, to pay for this with local option sales tax. If it was solely on property taxes, it would be an amount that would be really unacceptable to any of us. It would be probably a 20% increase in our levy each year to pay for that. So the most appropriate way, and we've done some surveys of the public, the most acceptable way would be the extension of the local option sales tax. So the local option sales tax currently is in place. The intent is to simply extend the time of that, not to increase the amount, keep it at exactly the same level that it's been at for the past dozen years. Sharon, anything you want to add on that, or you want to talk about the design of the pool?
I'll add a few things on sales tax and talk briefly about the design, but you did a great job covering the history and kind of why we want to look at the sales tax. So when you hear 0.5%, what does that really mean? It's 50 cents for every $100 you spend. And we hear a lot about tax impacts, obviously, because when we set the levies, property tax, and I think Bob really stated it well, the impact if we put this on property taxes, it would be greater impact per household than having a 0.5% sales tax. I also want to mention, when we look at Minnesota taxes, which business climate-wise, we got some work to do across the state, there's no doubt about that. But sales tax, because we do not tax clothing or groceries, those needed items, it's not as regressive as for, say, South Dakota. South Dakota, per household, when you add up all the taxes, sales tax, property taxes, income taxes, they actually pay more per household than in Minnesota. So we really feel the sales tax, in addition to some of the things that Bob stated. I do want to mention just a little bit about the design. That's, of course, the picture of our current pool. We are doing an outdoor pool, and one may say it's only 3 months out of the year. Why would you make such a huge investment? Well, first of all, there's a lot of things Minnesotans do that are really 3 months out of the year, because we've got winter that lasts a long time and the different seasons that probably impacts us here in Minnesota than other parts of the state. But when we looked at indoor pools versus outdoor, in 3 months' time, the revenue achieved from an outdoor pool exceeds a whole year of an indoor pool revenue. So kids, families, they want to be in that outdoor environment. Swimmers, no matter what age, they want to be outside when there's an opportunity to be outside. The other thing I'll mention is, no doubt we're going to have a lot of features for our kids and families, but one of the features we also have is a lazy river, which I know Bob comments on this. It's now called a leisure river. We actually think we're going to see all ages and demographics use that. You could have water aerobics walking through that lazy river, and so we hope to have all age demographics in using this particular pool. The size of the pool is going to be doubled. From about 500 users on a really busy day, we can almost get up to 1,200 users with the new aquatic center. So really key parts to the aquatic center. And I know I talked to an individual from Ghent, and one of his comments was, this really is a county-wide regional facility. It isn't just for the city of Marshall. It is going to be that draw for the region. So, thanks.
So let's pause there because we're going to switch gears here in a minute. Any questions about the proposed aquatic center?
Where are we going to build this?
I knew that question was going to be there. So great question. Her question is where. So we've done quite a bit of work on this. We don't have things absolutely finalized, but the preferred site is not the current site. For a couple reasons. First off, the current site doesn't have great visibility. We all know where it is because we know where it is, but if you're an outsider coming to the community, you may not know where it is. It's also constrained in there in terms of space. Would it fit? We have some issues with the access, and the parking probably wouldn't be adequate. It's close to the river, so the soils corrections are extensive that would be necessary there. So, and if we moved it to a different location, we should be able to, assuming that everything holds together, operate the current pool while the new one's under construction. So otherwise we would lose a whole season. So the location that we're looking at, and the city council has discussed this, but we haven't formally adopted. But the location that we're looking at is the green area that is just to the west of the Schwann's corporate office building. That offers some advantage. Most of that is green space there, kind of across from Carol's Cleaners, Napa Auto, Arnold, yeah, you know where I'm talking. So, and then that also offers the shared use of the parking that I'll say is to the south of that isn't currently being utilized all the time by Schwans. So that's a savings because Schwans would retain that for their future growth, but we'd also be able to use it for the summer months for the aquatic center. So that's the location that we're looking at.
Is that
So
big enough?
it's big enough. It's actually, you want to comment on that?
Sure.
I shouldn't do all the talking here.
That's okay. I think it's approximately 8 to 10 acres, and actually the new kind of standard for larger aquatic centers is about 8 acres. So it allows for some green space surrounding the aquatic center. If you see that picture, you're really confined to a lot of concrete. Now families want to maybe, during the breaks, kind of take a picnic on the lawn, take their rest where that might be. So it's a great location in terms of number of acres available.
I'm going to let you keep that. Al?
How long is it going to take to construct this new facility?
I had a schedule that I sent out to council. We're hoping that if we get approval in November of this year, we'll start construction in 2024. It would mean, obviously, taking that entire year. If we have it on this other location, we can keep our current aquatic center open. But we do believe if we can get a really good start in 2024, it'll be able to be open in 2025.
Do you
Yes.
have any thoughts what this property would be when you get switched over?
Right, so the, no firm plans other than, this would be decommissioned. Like a lot of things, when things are taken out, it doesn't look like as big of an area as was there before. But there are some other, park demands as things have changed over the years. Our park maintenance facility is back in that area, so they need some space. There's always, I guess in recent years, but there's been additional demand for things like pickleball fields or courts and and some other green space. There's also just to the, I'll say west, I get my directions kind of confused there. Just to the west of there is where the accessible playground was established, so there's quite a bit of kid activity there. So any other thoughts on what that space would
I
be
think you
used for?
covered it well.
Great question though, so, yes.
Someone just asked me a little while ago why you were thinking of that versus the old West Side School location.
Right.
That's not my question, that was from somebody else.
Yeah, no, her question is, why not the West Side School location? And we did look at that. We did talk about that, and that actually would have been a good location also. That is privately owned, and that the owner has other plans for that. I think that's fair to say. So
Yes.
it really wasn't available. So
Then why did we sell that then? Why did we keep that just for the school? or
right.
something?
So that was the school.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
know.
it wasn't the city, but good question. And so, okay, you and
Are
then.
you, are you concerned about the pool being on a major highway? I mean, 19, and the children walking near that and on their bikes and so forth. What are you gonna do with the traffic for the kids?
Want me to-
I'll let you start on that.
Okay. We like the location for visibility, and you're right. It's on a busier location than it would be tucked away behind Legion Field. We find actually pedestrian issues currently with the location and the bike trails that go to the pool. The kind of windy road back there does create some visibility issues for some of our younger children when they're coming on bikes. So we kind of actually have that issue now. There's no doubt we're going to have barriers put up between the street and the pool. There'll be fencing. There'll also be a number of trees we're either going to try to save or replant there too to create more of a natural barrier. But right now, for most visitors traveling through Marshall, they don't think 1 ounce about an aquatic center for the city of Marshall. It's just not visible enough. And you'll see in communities, they do typically put it in a more visible site. Maybe they don't visit at the time that they're driving through it, but if they see it, it intrigues their interest, and it puts it on their list to come back and visit again. So definitely a concern, but it's currently a concern at the current location, and we're definitely going to want to put a physical barrier to help contain that traffic.
The other thing I would say, and it is a good question, is that the design orientation is really more towards the south. And that's where the parking would be. And if you're coming from
Yep.
the north, there is the controlled intersection there. Right now, participants that are coming from the south, they do need to cross probably there at the Armory or before the Armory, and again, that's probably crossing 2 intersections there. So Sharon's right. We do have some challenges right now.
How large is the pool going to be?
You know the size?
Is it bigger than the one that is current?
It is, yes, and it's also a different shape. It's not rectangular, right? So it's a different design, but it will still have the features in terms of zero depth entry, which we don't have now. It will have the features that there can be the deeper areas for either lap swimming or diving or that type of thing. There also will be a separate area in the design that will be for a splash pad that can be used kind of before the season and after the season, because as you know, the season is really based on when help is available, and that's when college students are available. So we start about Memorial Day, and then you have to end almost before Labor Day. This would allow use of the splash pad that would be outside of the contained aquatic center area, but still on the same location for a splash pad. So you get that nice day in early September and on a Saturday that kids could enjoy that. And sometimes hopefully this year we'll get some of those days towards the end of May too. So
Snow is gone.
I feel like we could use all of our time talking about the aquatic center, but are there any other questions? Let's go through the next one pretty fast. So.
Okay. Last year, the city took on an indoor recreation study with the YMCA, and I always kind of say this, I think this is a long-range planning process. Most communities that have looked at indoor recreation, because of the cost and the partners you need to involve, it usually is a 10-year process. So we wanted to at least initiate it. The YMCA approached the city council probably on 3 different occasions about their current financial situation. And for them, what does their long-range success look like? And it involves partnerships. And how does the city want to partner with them? So we decided to take on this study. YMCA last 3 years has had little to no net income gain. So as a facility for our community, you can't continue down that same path for the future. It isn't going to work. And what does that mean for our community? We have a very successful recreation programming in the city. We know that we have a successful adult community center programming as well. So how does that look in the future? We're not really sure on that, but I believe, and I think most of our business sector and our community believes, we want to have a viable community center, whether it be YMCA or something else. It's an important facility for our community, and what does that look like long range?
Okay, thank you, Sharon. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I know there was a question earlier before we started about what's happening in terms of businesses and that type of thing. We think while the season is getting off to a fairly slow start, there's quite a bit of activity that will be happening this year. We can look at our activity downtown, and we're going to be talking in a second about some of the 3rd Street, Lion Street activity. We have quite a bit of commercial activity that is going on East College Drive. Some of that is already known. I mean, we had Dollar General that was constructed late last year. You have Family Dollar that will be constructed this coming year. They have the Restore has relocated to the former Abra building. Mike's Cafe will be probably reimagined, redone into something different. You have the former gas station that will be where Domino's will relocate, and then there'll probably be 2 other things that are in there. You have the CNN sales building where CNN has relocated to the former Border States facility. So that has been purchased by Lockwood Motors, and they'll be doing something with that, perhaps even removing that. And of course, you have Quick Trip that will be under construction, probably starting about June. So there's a lot of commercial and retail activity. One of the common things that people have been looking at over the years, once the Shopko stores closed nationwide, it wasn't just Marshall, all of them closed, what's going to happen with that, and of course the announcement has been made, and construction has started in the building for Harbor Freight. They will occupy about 1/3 of the Shopko building, and then there'll be 2 other things that also will eventually go in there, and we hope that can be announced fairly soon. Sharon, what am I missing?
I think you covered it well.
So we'll keep moving then. I know there's, yes, okay, you have a question.
I've had a lot of people ask me what's happening with the Thrifty building, because we always see that traffic in the parking lot. So a lot of the seniors, can you share anything on that or not yet?
I think we can
I
We
think
can
so.
share, can't we?
Sure.
First off, the city's not involved in that. That the building, I believe, has been purchased, right?
Right.
And it will be I'll call it groceries, but there may be some other things that will be in there. So there is work that's being done inside of that building. I don't know what their schedule is. Do you?
I'm not aware of the schedule. I do get to peer in it a little bit because my office is on the 2nd floor. It's been a slower process than I thought, so I haven't heard a deadline on that.
So the good news is it's not going to be vacant, and it will be fully occupied. So, if you look at our Main Street, it's a pretty healthy Main Street. With the if there is any openings, they usually don't stay very long. And of course, the big addition to our Main Street has been the relocation the purchase of the Atlantic Hotel and Mercantile Building by the Nakamas Enterprises. So they have, everyone knows that the reopened restaurant, Atlantic Place, the upper room on the 3rd floor, which is really a wonderful venue, and then their corporate offices for Ralco on the 2nd floor. And they have 50-some employees that are downtown. So that really has really enhanced and added to our downtown area. And then we have the former Varsity Pub. It was not the former, the what we call Block 100, which the Varsity Pub is on that block, and we all see the construction of the first building, which is 36 units of apartments that should be open in June. And then there's 2 other buildings that will also go on that, and one of those may start this year. It kind of depends on their securing a tenant for that, and maybe the second one will even start this year, depending on the development. So over the years, the city has, and you all remember that, there was probably 7 or so different things that were on that block. There was Hauge Egg, there was Marshall Foods that had 2 warehouses, there was Tiny Sharpening, there was Lindsay Water, there was Mid-Payne Gas. Yep, the dairy, there was, yeah. So you all remember all those things, and then as times changed and those either those businesses were no longer, had relocated or weren't in business anymore, then the city ended up acquiring all that, recognizing that we would acquire that when there was a willing seller, and then the city would be the buyer at that time. So, it took about 25 years, but in order to have a development, you really had to assemble all of those properties before a developer would come in. So, yes?
Where's all the parking gonna be for?
So that's a good question, and we will actually get to some of the parking things in a minute. So they have, with the development that's on there, they have the required parking. What they don't have is parking for everybody else, So one of the areas that we're looking at, and it has been used for parking, but it really hasn't been too available, is what I call the West River parking area. So that area on West College Drive, just west of the Atlantic Hotel, Atlantic Properties, just past the river. There's the bridge right out here that goes over to right there. That we think that area could be utilized a lot better for not only parking for the workers that are downtown, but also the visitors to downtown. So we're looking at that. We're also will be, and we'll talk about this in a minute, we'll be redoing what we call the Addison parking lot. That's the one that's kind of across from the movie theater. It's in really bad shape. So we'll be redoing that this year also. But you bring up a point. I mean, we always have to pay attention to parking.
If you had the swimming pool there, then there's gonna be parking for that too.
The parking, parking for the aquatic center will be south on Saratoga. So.
I have just one thing to say. There's a lot of stuff going on. I realize that it's all, I'm happy about that. But what we really, really, really need is like a Target or a. Please. Any kind of store like that.
Yeah. So our, we all say that, and we all hear that. And our EDA director is Lauren Deitz, and while I can't share a lot, we don't see a Target coming here, but she is working on other retailers, including clothing and that type of thing, the things that the market studies show that there is a demand for.
There's nothing here,
No, not
absolutely nothing. Walmart, that's it.
people have to go out of town. I mean,
Yeah,
you know.
we have to.
Yeah, although sometimes I take a step back and think of what we do have. We have a healthy Main Street. You go on 3rd Street, there's a number of different boutique shops that, tend to sell things that there is a market for.
I'm not talking about clothes even so much as like tablecloths and stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Shoes.
Yeah.
Can I comment on it?
Yes, you have a comment.
I do. I never say never to Target. And I know it's lofty and maybe a moonshot, but I never say never. I mean, one of the things that Target has tried in the last 3 years is a small scale store, not the same amount of square footage. That unfortunately has not worked for them. They're actually closing most of those small scale stores. So they're kind of learning too on what works and doesn't work. So, some of the newer retail that we do have, Aldi and Hobby Lobby, they weren't traditionally in these size of towns, Harbor Freight as well. So I think they are expanding their reach. So it may not happen in my tenure with the city, but I never say never because you just never know, and they've been more successful. The other thing I'll say is one of the 2 difficulties with retail, typically their lease rates that they pay a tenant is low. They don't want to stick their neck out on a long-term agreement. So for a building owner such as Shopko, they have to look at, if we put this investment into renovating this space, what's our return and when are we going to get that back? That has been a challenge for our current building ownership, whether it be Shopko or County Fair, is that return on investment. And the larger retails have a lot of power there. Secondly, the region itself. We're really proud of the fact that Marshall can bring in twice their size and population. So we grow to 25,000 each day. And it's hard to kind of get that through to some of the retailers, even though we can share the population data. Despite this, we have had some population decline in the region, not Marshall, of course. We've been able to withstand some of the pressures. So I think as we look 60-mile radius, it's kind of hurt us a little bit. But I also think retailers are expanding their footprint. Never say never.
Yeah. Thank you, Sharon. And the other thing I'd say about that is that, you know, the retail studies really look at different shopping patterns. And, you know, I always say that, you know, if we're talking about a college student looking at clothing, that's entirely different than someone else. And I'll use myself for the example. I would say, well, I buy my clothing at Runnings and I buy my groceries at Menards. Well, that's probably not typical. So, but Al, you had a question.
Yes, is there anything in the mill for the county fair property yet?
No. Is that fair? Well, go ahead.
Okay, so the building is owned by James Carr. I know that he always has something in his vision for the building, and I would say that that's still true. But he hasn't found that tenant that would make him, again, move forward in terms of redevelopment. He may redevelop it himself into a potential project, but we're kind of waiting on him. It's not something where he's asked the city for economic development assistance. I don't know if he would take it if it was offered to him, because any economic development assistance we give, there's requirements. You got public money, what are you going to do in return for the public money you're getting? So we have regular communications with James, and we're kind of waiting on him. So if you see him, bring it up, nudge him, give him an elbow. It might help.
Yes.
You talk about return on your investment. There isn't a whole lot of return on the investment on that property right now.
On the county fair property.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, it's a negative return right now. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to kind of quickly move through, but this has been a great discussion. Talk about some big projects that you'll see in it, and I'm going to spend probably most of the time talking about 3rd Street, Lion Street, because this project has been awarded. This will be disruptive. It'll be a big change. So Lion Street will be reconstructed all the way from College Drive over to the corner at Holy Redeemer Church. So on that street, of course, you have the movie theater, you have the museum, you have the post office, you have some other things, you have the funeral home, you know, so there's a lot of things on that, and then also 3rd Street will be reconstructed at the same time. And we mentioned earlier, there's quite a few businesses on 3rd Street. 3rd Street will be completely redesigned and constructed from building front to building front. It will become a one-way street coming off of College Drive and then heading down towards the post office to that intersection. So that section will be one way. It will have kind of more of a plaza feel. There will still be parking there, but it'll have more of a plaza feel, and that's really to serve the retailers that are along. And most of those retailers are more boutique retailers where, you know, people will go from one store to another kind of along that street. The Channel Parkway will be completely, I'll say mostly reconstructed. The surface will be removed and there'll be a new surface on there. Channel Parkway is a major truck route around the city, so it'll be all the way from Highway 59 all the way to Highway 19. So lots of freight moves on Channel Parkway. That's the reason. We did receive a grant from MnDOT that will assist us with this. Legion Road Stormwater Project, that also has been awarded. This is a continuation of our stormwater management. We kind of made great progress around the community. Probably one of the latter areas to address is that area along Legion Road, along the railroad tracks, on the other side of the railroad tracks, and then, you know, towards Turkey Valley Farm. So So this will address that. There'll be additional water retention and some storm sewer areas. And then finally, the preparation for the 2025 project. And again, this is 2 years out, but the preparation really happens now for the reconstruction of Highway 19 from Bruce Street all the way to 4th Street. So that'll be a major project, may actually be more than a 1-year project at this point. MnDOT, it's a MnDOT project and they haven't released the exact schedule. So those are major. There's other projects that will be going on this year, but those are the major ones. The one that you'll probably hear the most about is the most disruptive one, and that's 3rd Street and Lion Street. I mentioned earlier about the parking areas. The Addison parking lot across from the movie theater will be reconstructed, and then we're also, and we need a better name for this, but what I've been calling the West River, the area right over here, where a part of that has been designated as public parking, and a part of that is for private parking, and we're working with the Nakamas family to really come up with the right plan, and of course it's in their interest too, and they've been very good to work with on this. I'm going to kind of skip over workforce recruitment, but know that this is something that is really important. We actually have a bill in the legislature that's sponsored by the Southwest Minnesota Council of Mayors, which is about 4 or 5 of us, to have a program that mirrors a program that South Dakota has, where young people, if they are interested in learning a trade, that if they learn that trade and then stay in the region in that occupation for a period of 3 years, their tuition will be forgiven. That's been successful in South Dakota. We think it'll be successful here. It has been. We've been working with the legislature. There was actually another hearing last week that we had on that, and it's been well received by the legislature. This is another example of one that was in last year's legislative jobs bill, but they didn't pass the total bill, so it wasn't successful last year. Sharon mentioned earlier about our population demographics, and some of you know that we've been, in 2020 we challenged the results of the 2020 census, because the census happened on April 1st, 2020. The pandemic shut everything down, including the university and the dormitories, in the 3rd week of March in 2020. So the students in the dormitories and university housing weren't counted. So we did appeal that, and the census did approve our appeal. We are still awaiting what the number is. They haven't released that to us, but they have informed us that they agreed with our appeal. Last year, do you want to talk about the comprehensive plan?
Sure. Comprehensive plan was a 20-year plus old document. For most of the general public, you probably don't look at it or put your hands on it, but for city staff and the future direction of the city, it's a very important document. It helps a lot with planning and zoning. So sometimes when there's requests for economic development, housing development, we have to look at, does it match up well with the goals of the city into the future? And so we approved or adopted a new comprehensive plan this last year. Really where the rubber hits the road is going to be the planning and zoning map. There'll be some modifications. You'll hear a new term called mixed use, residential and businesses combined. Block 11 that the mayor mentioned is going to be potentially a location where we'll see businesses on the main level and residential on upper levels. So it's going to be more flexible, we believe, and better for future development for the city of Marshall.
Okay, so I wouldn't feel right about presenting this time of year if we didn't talk about flood potential. So that's what we're going to talk about. And of course, this can be a long topic, but the short message is really shown on this area here, that what impacts our potential. We know that we have above normal snowpack. So that's a risk factor. We also know that we have below normal frost depth. And in fact, the temperature of our frozen ground is right at that 32 degrees, so we have what could be referred to as a fairly soft frost. We have normal river ice. Our soil moisture going into the fall, because we had the drought last summer, our soil moisture is going into the year was below normal. We truly believe that some of the snow melt that has happened hasn't run off because it's been absorbed, because there was that extremely dry soils going into freeze up. Our river levels going into the fall were below normal, and our precipitation outlook, and this could change at the end of the week, but right now is normal. So our total risk factors right now, we've had conversations with National Weather Service, right now our total risk factors are normal to below normal for flooding on the Redwood River in Marshall. That's the good news. The cautious news is that here we are today, and low temperature tomorrow night is supposed to be like 8 degrees, and it's cold, and we're not melting snow. We're probably compressing snow, and on the landscape we have anywhere from 1 to 4 inches of water that's frozen on the landscape. The ideal conditions would be kind of what we've had perhaps for the last week. Gets above freezing during the day, below at night, so you have this gradual. But this weekend's going to be April 1st. And so the likelihood as you get into April of having a faster warm-up and a rain, that's a risk factor. So, what we really don't want to have happen is a 50-degree day with an inch or so of rain. Then we have problems. And probably the biggest problem that we would have would be the river ice. We had this 4 years ago when we had the ice jam, where we had a fairly late thawing of the river, which was actually still in March. It was like the 27th, I believe, of March when that happened. So but the ice melted quite rapidly. We had that ice jam, and it took, so that caused issues west of town, and then it was resolved. So we're watching it really close. We're not overly concerned, but we are, I would say, very, very well prepared. And then finally, I'll talk about, the legislature's in session, and a lot of what we do at the city tends to be impacted by what the legislature does. Last year, the legislature did pass, one of the few things that was passed last year was allowing THC-enhanced food and beverages. But it didn't accompany, that legislation was really unfinished. It didn't have any regulations or control that was with it in terms of how the products would be distributed, how it would be controlled retail, what control the city would have. So we put a moratorium on that until some of those things could be identified and would be identified by the legislature. And that moratorium, we put it in place in July, and it can last up to a year. And our hope was that the legislature would kind of define the THC edibles and beverages. What has happened this year is that whole discussion has gone into the proposed legislation for recreational marijuana. So we are watching that real close. We still have the moratorium on. Our hope is that whatever legislation is passed, that there'll be local control in terms of the number of retail outlets, similar to alcohol. There'll be also local control in terms of the space and the place. The place meaning where is it zoned, how close to other things like schools would it be, and then also the space, where in the retail establishment could it be sold? Is it behind the counter? Does the retailer have a requirement to verify age of the purchaser? That's what our hope is. You've all been following this. There's been many, many hearings on this, and we've had input in that. So with that, let's open it up for questions and discussion about anything we talked about or anything that we didn't talk about that we should have.
Does everybody know what the THC stands for?
Don't ask me to say what it stands for, because it's THC is
Okay.
that's the hallucinogenic ingredient that comes from hemp, that is the component in marijuana or so. But I can't say what THC actually stands for because I just can't say it.
It's a long chemical formula. Let me put it that way. So the name is long too.
Right. So the legislature did define low level, which is 5 milligrams per liter is the quantity. The recreational marijuana has a higher potency level of THC that would be in it. So the legislation is really kind of two-tier legislation, like where it could be sold in terms of the edibles or beverages, but then also the recreational marijuana would be treated differently. The one restriction that the last year's legislation did put on is that the only retailer that could not sell THC enhanced beverages or edibles are municipal liquor stores. So why they put that restriction on, we don't know. So, other questions? Yes?
Is there any plans for like a family type restaurant from commercial at all?
Well, I'll just comment that I do think, and the mayor mentioned this, I do think Mike's Cafe will be reutilized, I think. And I do think, although it may not be the same name and maybe not the exact same menu, I do feel very strongly you're going to see that reoccupied, and I think it'll be a great family restaurant for the community because Mike's was. And I'm sure you're like me, I know I miss Mike's a lot. It was very busy, very popular. They did a great job, and I think we'll see something in that building for sure.
I heard something about Tony's Depot going in there since it's the same owner. Heard any comments on that?
I can confirm I heard that rumor as well. So I can confirm that. Yeah.
You said that Family Dollar, now is that Dollar Tree there all together, aren't they? Where are they going on East College Drive?
Do you want me to just answer this quick? So if you know where, well, you know what, I'm going to have you do it because you probably know what the building used to be. So.
Okay, so if we're in the building where Bagels and Brew, and then there's the Auto Glass, so just to the west of there.
Yeah,
there was
that's better.
the empty lot. Prior to that, it was Hess's owned that property, and there was I think there was a grocery, like a ethnic grocery store that was most recently in there. So that's the lot. That building's been taken out, and that's where it will go. The other part of your question is, isn't Family Dollar and Dollar Tree, aren't they the same ownership? And yes, they are. And I asked the question of the developer when he came to the city council, is like, aren't you the same? And he said yes, and they intend to keep both stores open. Family Dollar has more of a food focus, where Dollar Tree has more of a non-food focus.
My sister lives at Little Fork, and they went to National Falls, and they closed all the Family Dollars, you know, and around there. And
Right.
that's why I was surprised when I saw Family Dollar in the fine print in the paper.
Right. Yeah, and I won't say we were surprised, but we certainly weren't involved in that recruitment process.
But Dollar Tree's gonna stay, because
That's what the developer told us, so.
good job.
Okay, any other questions? If not, this has been fun. We enjoyed being here, and we enjoy this group, so thank you very much.
Thank you.